Hey guys, this is Andrew here with High Level Reviews, and today I'd like to take a look at the classic RPG Xenogears. It was released in 1998 in North America on the PlayStation 1 and was initially met with a lot of high praise. Before jumping right into the review, I'd like to say that this is a pretty polarizing game. People like to take hard sides when they're discussing this game. Either it's brilliant and it's an epic tale and one of the greatest video game stories ever told because of the way the narration unfolds, because of the philosophical and psychological concepts tackled and included, or they despise it. They call it a pretentious piece of crap that isn't coherent, that is clumsy, and that completely falls apart in the beginning of the second disc, when narration style and everything changes about the game. Xenogears starts off cliche enough. It focuses on Fei Fong Wong as the main character, and no, I didn't make that name up, and he's brought to a village after suffering from retrograde amnesia. He's kind of adopted. And, as seems to be the case in most RPGs, he just can't allow things to be peaceful for too long. He inevitably messes up, takes control of a mech that crash-landed in the city, and inexplicably destroys the village with the mechs. And again, following suit with most RPG norms, he's unable to account for his proficiency in the mech. He has no explanation. He doesn't know why he is so dangerous in them. After leaving the destroyed city with Saitan, the village doctor, Fei then briefly runs into Ellie, another very strong character and Fei's love interest throughout the game, and is then rudely introduced to Bart, who leads a group of sand pirates and, as just about every character in this game does, has a very intricate backstory. After this rather typical introduction, it kind of diverges from normalcy here. And while they definitely incorporate some pretty prevalent tropes such as damsel in distress and hidden identity, they don't heavily rely on these themes to enforce the narrative. Instead, they accomplish a lot of this through great dialogue and wonderful character development as the game progresses. And truth be told, this is where the game really starts to shine. Fei's struggles with fate and identity are beautifully illustrated through wonderful monologues. And the backdrop of the two warring nations, Ava and Kislev, is felt throughout the world. Every town you visit, every place you go has references to this. But it doesn't take long for the story to transition from the worldly, almost mundane problems to the more grand and metaphysical issues. And the wonderful characters they've created and continue to develop throughout the game only serve to strengthen and accentuate the world. Just when you think you've nailed down a particular character, just when you think you know how he or she functions, they reveal a little bit more about their past, their history. And that practice turns characters that might have been uninteresting and uninspired cardboard cutouts into very lively, multi-layered characters. However, it is disappointing that some character stories are completely abandoned. Take, for instance, Rico, a very powerful demi-human who has wonderfully intricate backstory and foundation laid for his character, but then his story is just left behind and never revisited. These neglected storylines have led to questions about funding, time constraints, and the original plan for the game. It is in this too, as referenced earlier, when everything changes. People often cite this change as direct evidence for some type of funding cut, or some type of issue within the budget. Not only are major plot points just glossed over throughout character discussion, but the entire narration style alters, and you're simply, more often than not, told about major events rather than shown or allowed to play through them. Despite these admittedly serious accusations, the main story, albeit a little convoluted at times, still doesn't suffer from any major plot holes, and still manages to complete one of the more emotionally jarring epics ever told in an RPG. But rarely are games considered classics for story alone, and Xenogears is no exception. And though it does use a variant of the active time battle system used in Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy series, there are some very notable and innovative alterations to the system. You're allotted points to spend in the form of AP each turn on different types of attacks, and these base attacks can be combined to eventually perform death blows. Death blows are very powerful attacks that each character unlocks and learns throughout the game. You can also unleash devastating combos by saving your points each turn and stringing together a series of death blows in one single turn. However, this rarely feels worth it as it takes too long and almost never outdamages what you would have done by just using regular death blows each turn. The combo mechanic could have been more effectively implemented and might have added even more depth to the combat system had they taken a little longer to flesh out the specifics. Each character also has a set of abilities that are usually magic based they learn at certain levels. Though not very strong early, and usually only used on specific bosses, they can become very powerful throughout the game with specific items that enhance them. And though the focus is certainly on performing death blows, one definitely shouldn't overlook these abilities. The other type of combat comes when you jump inside of a mech, and there's a lot of fighting in your mech, and the style changes up slightly. You use fuel for attacks instead of AP and have to monitor its consumption and occasionally recharge it in longer fights. Mechs also perform death blows. When you learn a death blow out of a mech, you can also use that death blow in a mech, so they aren't learned separately. The systems are different enough to keep it interesting, but don't diverge so much so that you can't recall different mechanics or abilities when you're jumping from one form of combat to the next. They really found a great balance. My primary and probably sole major complaint is simply that combos could have been more properly implemented and more rewarding and far less time consuming to pull off. While they are certainly utilized against specific monsters and a few notable bosses, there's just not much of an incentive to use them. Graphically, the game features some crisp and wonderfully animated sprites, and the in-combat animations of different death blows are great and varied. You rarely feel that one death blow mimics another, or that it only slightly changes up one punch or one kick. Some of these backgrounds can feature some pretty blurry textures, and even for its age, it was still a little rough around the edges. The anime editions, however, were great. I just wish there had been a little more. It was said that there was over an hour of anime cutscenes, but because a lot of this is focused in the beginning of the game, there are large expanses of the game where there's simply no anime cutscenes whatsoever. The UI definitely could have used a mini-map, as it is easy to get lost or stuck in little spaces because of how indistinguishable certain environments are from others. Especially in small towns where one building isn't as distinct from another as it could be, and the occasional funky angle causes you to roam in circles longer than you should. There's also an interesting jump mechanic that adds another layer of depth to navigating the map. While some portions of this are wonderful and can be pretty enjoyable, others end up being just downright frustrating, because even with the ability to rotate the map, it's often difficult to get the exact angle on how or where you should jump. Nothing major, and perhaps it's only my own failures as a video gamer, but it does cause some momentary issues here and there. Musically, it is exactly what you would expect from a Yasunori Mitsuda title, the man responsible for Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger. There is excellent variance among the tracks, and they often capture a mood or atmosphere pristinely. I would even venture to call the soundtrack superlative in areas. It has Irish and traditional music influences and even includes a Bulgarian choral song. My only real criticism of the soundtrack is that it gets a little bit sparse. There are dungeons in the game with no music playing, or where music suddenly stops, and that can feel a little strange after constantly hearing music. But don't let that deter you. This is some of the best music you'll find in any video game, let alone RPGs. Despite its flaws, Xenogears is still one of the best RPGs of all time. It presents a poignant story that challenges you to consider deeper aspects of existence and has a rewarding and fun fighting system to complement the wonderful story. I can't recommend this game enough. It's a must-play for anybody with even a passing interest in RPGs. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on the video. This has been Andrew with High Level Reviews, and I appreciate you guys stopping by.